on behalf of not only the INMM but also the University of Tennessee, which is my employer, welcome you here to the Howard H. Baker Center. This is one of our signature facilities, and we're delighted to have you all here. Our colleagues from the University of Georgia and Mercyhurst, I'd also draw your attention to gradschool.utk.edu, where if you like what you run across here, you should take a look at the University of Tennessee as a graduate school. We'd love to have you. So we're going to begin this morning with Ray Smith, followed by Jim Morgan. And so I'll introduce each as we come to them. We'll start with Ray. Ray is the official historian of the Y-12 National Security Complex. He's only worked there for about 42 years, so he's got a few years left in him, I'm sure. He served in all sorts of different roles there. He is a television star. He's been featured on a number of TV shows, including I'm drawing the Y-12 A Nuclear Family, which is on PBS. He may even have a few copies of that to hand out. If you ask really nicely, he might even autograph them. So without further ado, let me introduce Ray Smith.
Well, good morning.
Good morning.
While he's putting this in, I'm going to tell you a story about me that will give you a little more insight into why I'm the historian at Y-12. I really do believe it's the best job in Oak Ridge, maybe even further. But I've been there, as he mentioned, over 40 years. When I've been there about 35 years, we had a contract change. Now, we're managing and operating contractor for the government, for the Department of Energy. Normally when we have contract changes, which come along periodically, we just bring in a new company by bringing in a president of the company and a lawyer. The rest of us just keep on doing our jobs. We call ourselves weebies. We'd be here before you came, and we'll be here when you're gone. We do have a lot of changes. In this case, however, this contractor brought in 100 people, replaced the entire top of the organization, so I lost my position. Now, the first thing they had to do was to find 800 buildings, and they made us mad, so there wasn't anybody helping. They called a meeting to figure out what to do. And I went to that meeting, and when they started talking about needing to do a due diligence study to find those 800 buildings, I held up my hand. I said, I know where all 800 of them are. I'll find them for you. So they let me help do the due diligence study. Now, for those of you who understand that kind of stuff, all it really meant was I had to go home that night and learn Microsoft Access and come in the next day and build a database for them. No big deal. I did that. So that got them started, and then they got some money from Congress to tear down some of these old buildings. Well, bless their heart, they didn't have a clue which buildings they needed for their missions and which ones they didn't. So they had to call another meeting. When they did, I went to that meeting and held up my hand again. I said, I know, I'll make you a list. And I did. I made them a list of buildings that they could tear down that wouldn't impact the mission. We've been tearing buildings down for over 10 years. We've torn down over 300 buildings. They're still following my list. So I helped them about 2 or 3 years tear those buildings down, and then I went to them and I said, you know, when you tear all these buildings down, you're losing a lot of history. And they figured me out by then, so they said, okay, Ray, what is it you want to do about that? I said, I'll be your historian until I retire. And they agreed to it. We built the History Center. We've made these documentary films, and while we're talking about documentary films, let me take just a minute and show you what we're talking about. And they've also let me do things like provide tours for the plants, which I'm going to do for some of you on Friday. And so everything's going along smooth. They only have one problem now. I won't retire. That's the best job in the world. I'm not quitting. These videos that we've made, this is The Secret City. It's 2 90-minute DVDs. Tells the history of Oak Ridge during the war years. and then tells it up to 2006. Now this is one Howard mentioned, the Nuclear Family, which is 4 30-minute episodes that we developed for the public television that tells the history of Y-12. And then this one has about a dozen short videos on it that I use at the museum. And I'm going to show you one of them today, and the rest of them are on there. Now, Howard mentioned that I might be giving out some of these. I'm going to give you a test at the end of my presentation. If you answer the questions on the test, you get a copy of these 3 DVDs. Now, there's another way you can get copies. If you'll interrupt me during this presentation and ask me a question, I'll give you a set of the DVDs. Now, there's even a third way, I'll have to admit. If you'll just come to the Y-12 History Center, they're laying on a table out there, and you can pick them up anytime you want them. So, remember, there will be a test at the end, but you can get the DVDs by just stopping me anytime during this presentation, and I'll make sure you get one. I'll also make sure that we quit by 10 o'clock because I don't want to get into the next speaker's time. So, this is what I'm going to talk to you about. We've already talked about me, and that's enough of that. Let me show you here where Oak Ridge Reservation is. The 60,000 acres that were taken for the Manhattan Project are bordered on the east, west, and the south side by the Clinch River. Okay, the city of Oak Ridge is here. Just across Pine Ridge is Y-12. Down in, and that's in Bear Creek Valley. Over here in Bethel Valley is the Oak Ridge National Laboratory. And then up here in East Fork Valley is K-25, the gaseous diffusion plant, which is now East Tennessee Technology Park. And then S50, the thermal diffusion plant, was also located there in that same location. So this is kind of gives you an overview of what the reservation looks like. As I mentioned, Y-12 lays down in Bear Creek Valley, and the other 2 sites are in other valleys on the side as well. And Y-12 is a half a mile wide, 2.5 miles long, and Pine Ridge is on one side, Chestnut Ridge on the other. Now that'll be significant in just a minute, but let me give you a bit of the details about Y-12, how large it is, and the fact that we've got actually it's about 5,000 employees that are working there as part of the managing and operating contractor, and about 2,000 subcontractors. So you've got about 7,000 to 8,000 people coming on site every day. This is our mission: continue to maintain the nation's nuclear arsenal. All of the nuclear weapons secondaries for all nuclear weapons are built at Y-12. Also, we provide the fuel for the naval reactors, highly enriched uranium. We've always done that and continue to do it today. And we'll go anywhere in the world along with the Oak Ridge National Laboratory and bring the highly enriched uranium back to Oak Ridge. That seems to be not protected well enough that we can feel sure it won't fall into a terrorist's hands. So those are the main missions. Y-12 began as a part of the Manhattan Project. Its primary reason was to separate the uranium-235 for Little Boy, the first atomic bomb ever used in warfare. And if you think about it, that's what it looked like in 1945. That's why we did it. Okay? And you remember I told you that Y-12 is a half a mile wide, 2.5 miles long, lays right down in Bear Creek Valley. If you read in the history books about why this place was chosen, you'll find that it'll talk about those ridges and valleys. This is what Bear Creek Valley looked like before the Manhattan Project. The history books will say that those ridges and valleys were able to put the plants down in the valley, and remember they're building a bomb. If it blew up, the ridges would project the explosion up in the air and would protect the city, which is just on the other side of the ridge, as you noted in that overview I showed you. What may be closer to the truth, however, is when Albert Einstein wrote that letter to President Roosevelt, saying that Germany's buying up all this uranium ore, And he was afraid that they were going to build a bomb out of it. Roosevelt knew it would be an expensive undertaking. So he put General Groves in charge of the Manhattan Project. Now, Groves had just finished building the Pentagon, so he knew how to put a large construction project together. He knew how to get private industry involved. And he also knew how to spend money. So President Roosevelt also called in Senator McKellar, and he said, Senator, I need to put a large amount of money against the war effort, and I can't let the press or anyone know how much it is or what it's being used for. Can you help me with that? Senator McKellar said, yes, Mr. President, I can do that for you. Just where in Tennessee are you going to put that thing? Now that may have more to do with Oak Ridge getting selected, this part of East Tennessee getting selected, than any ridges or valleys. Another Senator McKellar story, and I know this one's true because the man that it happened to is still alive today. His name is Lester Fox. He's the patriarch of the Fox automobile dealerships in the area. But in 1942, he was a sophomore in high school in Oliver Springs, a little community just north of where Oak Ridge is today. And he was skipping school. Him and his buddy were playing the pinball machine. Now, when they got through, they were walking down the main street of the little town, and they walked by the telephone office. The telephone operator leaned her head out and said, Lester, go get the principal. He's got an important phone call. Now, Lester's skipping school, but he does. He goes and gets the principal. The principal comes and takes the phone call, comes back to the school, calls all the students together in an assembly, and says, I've just gotten a phone call from Senator McKellar. He wants me to tell you to go home and tell your parents you're going to have to find another place to live. The government's going to take your property for the war effort. Now, Lester swears that's the way these 3,000 people first learned they were going to have to get off of 60,000 acres in order to make room for the Manhattan Project. Many of them didn't have automobiles. They didn't have trucks to move their belongings. They had a car, they might not be able to buy gas for it or tires. Those things were rationed. What they did have was young men in the military getting killed. So they wanted to do anything they could to help stop that killing and end that war. So they got off of their property in a matter of days, literally, and made room, 60,000 acres available for the Manhattan Project. Now, one of those families that had to leave in 1942 was descended from a man named John Hendricks. John was born in 1865, Civil War time, right in Bear Creek Valley. In 1900, his youngest daughter died. His wife accused him of being the reason she died because he corrected the child the day before. So she left him, took the rest of the children and went to Arkansas and never came back. Now I want you to watch a little movie with me and let's hear the rest of the story about John Hendricks.
Bear Creek Valley someday will be filled with great buildings and factories, and they will help toward winning the greatest war that will ever be. These words were spoken nearly 40 years before World War II would reach into this peaceful valley, and they were spoken by a man who was considered insane by some, a prophet by others. His name was John Hendricks. At the end of the 1800s, John Hendricks lived with his wife Julia and 4 children near where Bull Run steam plant sits today. But then tragedy struck when his 2-year-old daughter died of diphtheria. Because he had recently disciplined the child, his wife blamed John for her death. Julia left John, taking the remaining 3 children with her to Arkansas, and she never returned. Grieving and guilt-ridden, John sought comfort in religion and began praying devoutly. One day, as legend has it, he heard a voice telling him to go into the woods and lay on the ground for 40 days and 40 nights. Heeding the voice's command, John lay down in the forest and prayed for a sign. As temperatures fell, a kind neighbor brought a blanket to warm John's tortured soul. and fed him some chicken soup. She found him barely alive, with his hair frozen to the ground. When John Hendricks finished sleeping on the ground for 40 nights, he had tremendous stories to tell. He'd tell anyone that would listen. Of course, they thought he was crazy when he was telling these stories, so they put him in a hospital for the insane. He didn't stay long, however, till he escaped, and he told the authorities God's going to destroy that place. Sure enough, his prediction came true. In a few weeks, when lightning struck the hospital, and it burned to the ground. Eventually, John Hendricks overcame his grief and married Martha Jane Gregory, who had 7 children from a previous marriage. John amazed his stepchildren with stories of his visions. He told them that one day cargo would be shipped through the air. Martha rebuked him, saying, "John, you shouldn't have such food talk."
Mama told me a lot about him. She thought a lot of him as a stepfather. And he would have to go off in the woods and get visions, he thought, and come back and tell what he dreamed. Anyway, a vision he'd see. It was going to be a big place there one day.
John's most famous predictions centered around the area now known as Oak Ridge, and eerily predicted the end of World War II.
There will be a city on Black Oak Ridge. Big engines will dig big ditches. Thousands of people will be running to and fro. They will be building things, and there will be a great noise and confusion, and the earth will shake. I've seen it. It is coming.
John Hendricks died in 1915, so he didn't live long enough to see his predictions come true. He's buried here in Hendricks Creek subdivision in the middle of the city of Oak Ridge. His predictions lived on, however, and serve as a testament to the man who had become known as the prophet of Oak Ridge.
I just put this picture up here because I like it. And you look at that woman. How would you like to live with a woman that looked that sour all the time? Old boy's got a pistol up here, riding a mule. Oh, bless his heart. This is General Groves. I'll tell you that without General Groves, there wouldn't have been an effective Manhattan Project, nearly as effective as it was. He had, he went to get what they called a AAA credit rating, and when he went in, he took a letter with him authorizing him to have that credit rating. He gave it to the man who needed to approve it and said, "I need you to sign this letter." The man said, "I don't believe I'm going to sign that." Groves picked it up and said, "That's all right, I'll tell the president you wouldn't sign it." And as he started out the door, the man said, "Well, wait a minute, I believe I can sign it." He could get about anything he needed. He had a blank check. Here's what his second in command, Colonel Nichols, had to say about General Groves. First, General Groves is the biggest SOB I've ever worked for. He's the most demanding, most critical, always a driver, never abrasive, sarcastic, disregards normal organizational channels, extremely intelligent, has the guts to make difficult, timely decisions. Most egotistical man I know. He knows he's right, sticks to his decision, abounds with energy, expects everyone to work as hard or harder than he does. If I had to do my part of the atomic bomb project over again, had the privilege of picking my boss, I'd pick General Groves. I'd say that's true, that if he hadn't been the right person at the right place at the right time, there would never have been a successful Manhattan Project. We couldn't do what he did. We couldn't get the paperwork ready in 18 months, and he built these plants, many of them in 18 months. That's what Oak Ridge looked like. That's Tennessee Avenue. Yes, there was a lot of mud. These houses are still there today. This is the Children's Museum up on top of the ridge. That was the Highland View Elementary School at that time. The only difference now, there are lots more trees, and those houses have roofs on them, pitched roofs. But there's a whole area of Oak Ridge, that's the historic area of the east end of the town, that has those houses still in it today. There were lots of trailers. There were 75,000 people living in the city of Oak Ridge in August of 1945. Fifth largest city in the state, wasn't on any map. These dormitories are gone. This is Jackson Square. It's still there today. And Bill Wilcox, who was the historian until he passed away this past Labor Day, city historian. He was also the technical director of the Y-12 plant and of the K-25 site when he retired. But he came in 1943, and when he did, him and his buddy walked around the town checking it out, and they noticed there were men's dormitories and women's dormitories. So they started counting, and in this area here, they counted 5 men's dormitories and 10 women's. They thought that was pretty good odds. The average age for most of the time Oak Ridge was in the Manhattan Project was 27. Lots of single people here. There was the 9th largest bus system in the nation in Oak Ridge. They went around to all of the surrounding cities and brought people in to work. You remember me talking to you about Lester Fox? Lester and his brother saw an opportunity, so they bought 100 buses, and they started them a bus system. Lester said those buses broke down every day. One day he was going through the little town of Clinton, which is just east of Oak Ridge, and he was driving a wrecker. He had one of his buses on the back of that wrecker tied to it. And he saw another one of them broke down. So he just pulled off right in front of it and tied that second one on with a log chain. He pulled out on the road with those 2 buses behind his wrecker. Policeman stopped him and said, "Lester, you can't do that. Leave one of those buses and come back and get it." And he said, "Besides, I want you to meet me at 8:30 on Monday morning in the courthouse." Lester worried all weekend about what was going to happen to him when he went to the courthouse on Monday morning, but he went. Right at 8:30, he walked in, and there was that policeman waiting on him. He said, "Lester, come with me." He took him down to the clerk's office and said, "Give this boy a driver's license." He was 14 years old when he got his driver's license. Lester also said he used to come to Knoxville to get parts for those buses. They broke down every day. And when he got over here one day at the parts store, he drove around the block trying to find a parking place, and there wasn't one to be had. So he just finally, in desperation, parked his truck right in the front door of the store, right on the sidewalk. Got out, went in, got his parts, and he come running back out. Policeman was writing him a parking ticket. He said, No, you can't do that. I'm from Oak Ridge. We're trying to win the war over there." So the policeman tore the ticket up. He come back the next day. He didn't look for a parking place. He just jumped right up on that sidewalk and got out. When he did, the same policeman, looked at him. He just waved, and the policeman waved back. Lester never parked anywhere except right in the front door from then on. This is what Y-12 looked like as it was starting up. $480 million, build 1,152 Calutrons. I'll tell you what a Calutron is in just a minute. 22,000 people working on 1,152 Calutrons for almost a year just to get enough uranium-235 for a little boy and a little bit left over. 60 kilograms, about 140 pounds, less than a gallon in volume. Enormous activity, enormous effort. That's one of the reasons that Great Britain came to the United States and said, "Look, we need to build this atomic bomb, but we don't have the resources to do it. You do." If you look at what happened, the Manhattan Project employed all of the resources. Many cities were involved, not just Oak Ridge, Los Alamos, and Hanford. There was a lot of support activities, and there was a whole nation working together to pull this off. This is what Y-12 looked like. Those are the large buildings that had the Calutrons in them. The Calutron was invented by Ernest Lawrence, and it's called a Calutron because of California University cyclotron. The alpha units are in an oval shape. That's where it got its name for a racetrack. This is a batch process where these vacuum chambers are between these magnets. And those of you who come on a tour out to Y-12, I'll show you the only remaining alpha Calutron magnets in the world. But this is a very simple physics process No moving parts, just two large magnets on either side of a vacuum chamber where the material goes in at the bottom, gets bent, and comes out at the top. And they capture it, batch process now. 1,152 of them, 22,000 people. Very time and labor intensive, time consuming, labor intensive. And the way I explain it to people, just to be sure they grasp the idea, is if I held my hand up and took two rubber bands and hung them down from my hand, I put a golf ball on one and a ping pong ball on the other, held it to my side, and then spun it real quickly, that golf ball would stretch that rubber band further than the ping pong ball. So I'd get two arcs. Same thing happens with uranium-235 and 238. 3 neutrons difference, but that's enough difference in mass that when that material, one ion at a time, goes into the magnetic field and bends, centrifugal force causes the 238 to make a slightly larger arc than the 235. You can catch that 235. Now the only problem is in 1,000 pounds of uranium ore, there's only 7 pounds of uranium-235. So you've got to separate a lot of material just to get a little bit of uranium-235. Do you reckon that's why it takes so long for North Korea and Iran to get that highly enriched uranium? There was a shortage of copper during the Manhattan Project, so they borrowed 14,700 tons of silver and brought that down here for the Manhattan Project. Now, I happen to know where this is located. I know where that chain link fence is. And I can tell you that if you drive by the road that goes by Y-12, you can see that chain link fence. So at one time, there was over $400 million worth of silver stacked up on pallets and only a chain link fence protected it. These are the Calutron girls. They had these young girls right out of high school that they used to operate these Calutrons. This one is Gladys Owens. Gladys came back in 2004, saw her picture, and I brought her out to the Y-12 site. She said, "Ray, I never did know what I was doing. Can you show me?" I said, "Yeah, Gladys, I can show you." So I set her down in front of the controls, just like she operated in the Manhattan Project. Opened up one of the doors, and I said, "Gladys, when you were adjusting these knobs," and that's what they did, 8 hours a day, they adjusted those knobs to keep that meter on a certain spot. I said, "When you were doing that, you were changing the value of a," and she just reached over and tapped me on the arm. She said, "Ray, I still don't know what I was doing, but I am so glad that I could do it." And she was so proud that she helped to win the war. She said, when we finished the training, there was this man that came into the classroom. He was obviously somebody important because he was wearing suit clothes. And she said, he said to us, "Young ladies, we can't tell you what you're going to be doing. We can only show you how to do it. And all I can say is if our enemy gets it first, God help us." And she remembered that 65 years later with a great deal of pride that she didn't know what she was doing, but she knew she was helping the war, to win the war, and she knew how to do it. She also said, "Ray, I know if I had any bobby pins in my hair, they'd just go stick to the wall somewhere." So I knew there was something going on. This is also the picture, by the way, that Denise Kiernan saw. Denise is an author over in Asheville, North Carolina. Matter of fact, she's on Fox 43, Channel 10 this morning. As we're speaking, she's being interviewed about this book, Girls of Atomic City. She's going to speak for us at noon today at a literacy luncheon in Oak Ridge. She saw this picture, and oh, by the way, all of these pictures that I'm showing you, all these black and whites, they were all made by Ed Westcott. He's the famous Manhattan Project photographer. Ed's still alive. He's 92 years old. But he made this picture, and she saw it, and she said, "I would like to look into this." She'd already written a book about signing their life away, about the people who signed the Declaration of Independence and signing their rights away, the book about people who signed the Constitution. So, and she was a television producer for the award-winning So You Want to Be a Millionaire. She produced that first series of that. So she had this in her files that she wanted to do research on it at some point in the future. And I write a newspaper article about the history of Oak Ridge each week, so she saw one of my articles, called me up and said, "Ray, I want to write a book about the girls of Atomic City." And I said, "Okay, Denise, I'll put it in the paper and we'll get some of these girls to come forward and you can interview them." She said, "No, Ray, you don't understand. I don't work that way. We don't need any publicity. I want you to introduce me to some people that I can interview without any fanfare." She worked on the book for 3 years, and I introduced her to several of the people. One of them's this man right here. That's Connie Bowling. He's dead now. But when we opened this building up for the public, and Gladys was there, Connie called me up and he said, "Ray, I want to be there when you bring the public in to see Beta 3. Now he was 98 at the time. And I said, "Connie, you have to climb stairs to get up there." He said, "Ray, I'll beat you up those stairs." So he came. Him and Gladys welcomed 2,000 people when we first opened the facility up to the public and let them come through. But Denise has interviewed, and really, you think about it, Ray he introduced her to all these people. No, I introduced her to one, Colleen Black. Colleen took it and introduced her to everybody else. She's just the greatest lady in the world. She's going to be there today at noon too, and we'll make a big deal over Colleen. She did a great job for us. But this book went to number 7 on the bestseller list. It's now out in paperback just this last week. Denise is doing more to promote the positive image and the history of Oak Ridge than anything else we could possibly have done. This is what General Groves had to say about these young girls. I couldn't get by with this today, but I quote him, "Above all, I knew the labor supply of East Tennessee was of a very high order from the standpoint of willingness to work. I knew that we had to use many female operators. Tennessee girls would be much more easily trained, would do better work than those of some other sections of the country. The principal reason for this was that the women here were not sophisticated. They hadn't been reared to believe they knew it all." Couldn't get by with that today, could we? But that's a little more insight into General Groves. Now, when we were finishing this documentary film on the nuclear family, we needed a wrap. We needed something to put at the end of it, and we couldn't decide what to use. And we finally decided to use this image that Ed took of these ladies leaving the plant. Now, Ed's standing in a pickup truck up here, shooting this picture, telling these women to walk toward him. And oh, by the way, this picture is a 20 by 50 foot mural in the Jack Case Center in our cafeteria. And when we put it up and opened that cafeteria, I put that picture in the paper and asked for anybody who was still alive to identify themselves, and we wanted to invite them to the lunch that we were having when we recognized or cut the ribbons on that building. This lady here called me, this lady in the black sash, and this one here with the coat over her arm, she was Miss Atomic Bomb in 1945. So we had a great time with that. And then, see this fella here? He's standing still, he's not walking. The rest of them are walking forward like Ed's asking them to do, but he's not. So when we remade the picture, that's why we wanted to wrap the video up. We set them up in front of the highly enriched uranium materials facility, kind of arranged them like they were in the picture, and we put Ed in the middle of it and said, "Ed, don't walk. The rest of you walk." That's me walking behind him saying, "Ed, don't move, don't move," because he wanted to walk just like everybody else did. But when you watch the documentary, you'll see that remake of that film. Security was a real issue during the time. What you see here, what you do here, what you hear here, when you leave here, let it stay here. All kinds of billboards. This is what little boy looked like. This is the graphite reactor where they proved the principle that you can produce plutonium in a uranium reactor. Then it went out to Hanford, Washington, built all those reactors out there that produce the plutonium that's in all nuclear weapons today. This graphite reactor didn't have a mission after the war ended, nor did those calutrons. The K-25 gaseous diffusion plant came online, so you could produce highly enriched uranium there at about a tenth what it costs to do it in Y-12. So they shut Y-12 down. They kept some of the calutrons operating, and they began to send stable isotopes over to the graphite reactor. And they produced the world's first nuclear medicine coming from those radioisotopes in the graphite reactor. So the same science, the same equipment that separated the uranium for little boy also separated isotopes for medical isotopes. Dr. Alvin Weinberg, who was the director of the Oak Ridge National Laboratory for many years, was asked, what's the most important contribution Oak Ridge has made to the world? Without any hesitation, he said medical isotopes. Helps millions of people every year. That's what Fat Man looked like. This is an interesting story at the Potsdam Conference. You've got Truman, Stalin, and Churchill. Truman is said to have mentioned to Stalin, he just learned while we were over there that the Trinity test was a success. So he said to Stalin, we've got a new bomb that's going to end the war. Stalin said, I know. This man here had told him, this is Klaus Spooch. He gave the plans to Fat Man to Russia before we ever exploded it. He spent 14 years in prison after the war. When he got out of prison, he gave the plans to China. This man may have done more to spread nuclear weapons around the world than anyone other than possibly Professor Khan of Pakistan. This is the highly enriched uranium materials facility, the Jack K Center and the New Hope Center. 3 of the new facilities at Y-12. This is the uranium processing facility, an artist rendition of it that's going to be built. It'll be located just west of the highly enriched uranium materials facility. You folks haven't asked any questions. I'm not getting to give up my... Usually when I get to about this point in the presentation, somebody wants to know about the nun. You ever heard about the nun? Do you want to know about the nun? It's hard to give these things away, let me tell you. Thank you. She came across the ridge. Remember I told you Oak Ridge is just across Pine Ridge. She came across to the water tanks, and 2 companions walked down to this corner of the highly enriched uranium materials facility. What should have happened when she cut the first fence? About 6 security police officers should have shown up with rifles and said, you do that again, I'm going to kill you. That'd been the end of it. Didn't happen that way. What happened is when they cut that first fence, they thought it was a nuisance alarm and they ignored it. Cut the second fence, they said, we better look at that. They took their camera that was designed to look at that portion of the fence, and it was out of service, so they couldn't look at it. Cut the third fence, and they said, we better send somebody up there. They sent 1 individual. That 1 individual saw an 82-year-old nun and treated her like an 82-year-old nun. Wrong. And lots of people lost their jobs. The contractor lost the contract. Business is no longer in town. The whole Department of Energy has looked at all of the defense or the security situation and made major changes. If you had told me, Ray, you've got a week, come up with the most ridiculous thing you can think of that would challenge our security, I would have never thought of an 82-year-old nun crossing Pine Ridge. We just didn't have that in our thought processes. I guarantee you we do now. And I wouldn't, this is what I'll tell you as I end this little story, I wouldn't want to be the second nun that tried to get into Y-12. This is what's going to happen as we build this new facility. They're clearing the space, they're actually moving the road now, already starting on it, put in the foundation, and then the building will come up. Now you've just looked at about 8 to 10 years of construction effort to build this uranium processing facility. Largest construction project in the history of Tennessee since the Manhattan Project. I'm not going to dwell on this long, but I want you to see the cost of building it compared to other construction projects in the state.
it's a huge economic boom for the entire southeast. I'm going to skip over more of those talks about it and go on to this nuclear non-proliferation efforts. Y-12, as I say, along with the Oak Ridge National Laboratory, very much involved in reducing the nuclear materials around the world, helping to train people so that they can detect that nuclear material, global security training, bring the National Guard in and provide training to protect and secure nuclear materials. We have training set up in some of our old facilities that are set up to look like medical facilities. And again, these are some of the people that we've trained. We have converted uranium to nuclear power fuel. A third of the lights in this room right now are being powered by TVA, Tennessee Valley Authority. Electricity from Tennessee Valley Authority nuclear reactors that are being fueled by former Soviet Union nuclear material that's been downblended. We also have research reactors around the world that we're trying to convert from highly enriched uranium to low enriched uranium, and that is taking place. These are areas where we've secured material from and brought to Y-12 in order to protect it. The first one started in Kazakhstan. I'm going to skip over these shots about where Y-12 is going and talk to you. Just all I'll say about the Oak Ridge National Laboratory is this Department of Energy's most diverse and largest national lab. We have we do have the most powerful scientific computing available anywhere except in China, and we're about to overtake them again. And I don't think they'll ever catch up again. The most powerful pulse neutron source is there with the spallation neutron source. So working in conjunction with the laboratory, we've been able to do some very significant things. This is Project Sapphire, started in 1994 by bringing this material back to USA. And this in Georgia. And some of the airplanes, C-5A, that's been used. This is the shipment from Libya when Gaddafi decided he didn't want to be in the nuclear weapons business. And look at the size of those centrifuges. They're kind of small. US's is quite a bit larger. We did reverse engineer what we have here, and we know what they're doing. That's another reason why it takes Iran and North Korea so long to get the material. Remember, making a bomb is not that difficult. Little boys, just a little bit of uranium here, a little bit of uranium here, a gun barrel between them, and a little dynamite blow them together. But getting that highly enriched uranium is what's difficult. Getting that plutonium is what's difficult. Other places that we've gone to bring material back, even to Iraq, and in 2008, Chile. This is the one where there was an earthquake at the port where they were going to bring the material out. The last thing you really want to do is have to change your plans right in the middle of a secret operation. But they had to because the port wasn't operational and they had to go to a different location. France, Mexico, Australia, it's amazing where Oak Ridge touches when it comes to nuclear materials. Again, that's where we've recovered the materials from. I told you it's going to be a test now. So here's your test. Here's your chance to get your DVD. Pick your question and answer it. Or if you don't like any of those, ask me a question. Yes, sir.
Question. Why did you take HU out of France?
Oh,
Why did you take HU out of France?
that's so easy to answer. I don't know. Anybody in the room have any idea?
What was the question?
Why did you bring it out of France? This man over here knows. Let me give you a microphone to talk into.
I'm Morris Hassler from the White 12 National Security Complex. Actually, all those programs were under me at the time, so I can tell you. Now. As part of the overall Global Threat Reduction Initiative around the world, what we want to do is to get HEU out of commerce. And so the material in France was HEU reactor fuel that was excess, that was at the Circa facility, that they had no use for. So therefore it was U.S. origin material. In order to get those stocks down, we removed it out of France. It wasn't that it was unprotected or that France is a country of threat. However, if you're trying to get all of HEU out of commerce, them as well as the other cities that he showed are one of the things that we're doing.
What a great resource it is to have someone like Morris here in the room.
Thank you. My question goes back to the beginning of Oak Ridge. When the site was originally constructed, it displaced thousands of people and
Yes.
basically wiped out complete communities. Graveyards had to be uprooted and relocated, whole communities, etc. Has any effort been made to preserve those people's stories and kind of
Yes.
document?
Yes, as a matter of fact, there's still 72 cemeteries on the site, small family plots. There is a man named Don Raby who took it on himself to go to the National Archives in Atlanta and to copy the photographs of every home and every building, actually, that was taken down as a part of the Manhattan Project. They photographed it before they removed it. So he's created a CD of all of those home places. Many of those 3,000 people that had to leave, they don't even know about their home place except through a picture. So that's been a very valuable asset to have available for people to see. You can also still be buried in these cemeteries. I had a phone message the other day from a lady that said, "Ray, call me. I want to be buried in New Hope." Now, New Hope's the little cemetery right at the entrance to White Whale. So I called her back. She seemed like a pretty spry little lady. So I said, "You're not going to die today, are you?" She said, "No, Ray, but if I don't tell somebody where I want to be buried, that undertaker won't know what to do with me." So she's going to be buried in New Hope. If you've got family already there, you can still be buried in these cemeteries. Thank you for that question. Yes, ma'am.
I'll answer question 3.
Thank you.
I think he was buried in the Hendricks subdivision in Oak Ridge.
He is in Hendricks Creek subdivision, named for John Hendricks. He's buried on the top of the hill in that subdivision in a man's yard, number 123 Hendricks Drive. And he's buried on top of the hill because he wanted to keep an eye on his apple orchard, which was down in the valley.
I was just going to answer question 2.
All right.
1915.
That's exactly right.
I was going to answer.
I think with that.
No, the second question. He was born in 1865.
That's exactly right. Yeah, very good. Anyone else?
I've already got copies of the DVDs.
Yeah,
Right?
I know.
Could you speak a little bit about the effort to create a national historic?
Yes, thank
Capability.
you. Thank you very much. There is before the Senate, as we speak, a bill, well, it will be put before the Senate. It was before the Senate, the House last year and passed. And it will pass this year in the Senate, I believe. It's a bill to create a Manhattan Project National Historical Park. There'll be 3 locations. It'll be in Oak Ridge, Los Alamos, New Mexico, and Hanford, Washington. Here in Oak Ridge, the locations that will become a part of the national park, at Y12 will be building 9731, the first building completed on the site where the Alpha Kayatron magnets are, where some of you are going this Friday. And building 9204-3, which is the Kayatron building that has operated up until 1998 and still in standby today. That building, those 2 buildings will be preserved and will be made available for tours and as a part of the park. Over at the Oak Ridge National Laboratory, the graphite reactor will be preserved. It's already on the National Register of Historic Places, and it will become a part of the national park. At the K-25 site, East Tennessee Technology Park today, they will create a replica of a part of that large U-shaped building that was used to separate all of the highly enriched uranium, essentially, that we have in nuclear weapons today. It operated until 1964. By the way, we haven't created any weapons-grade highly enriched uranium since. We just continue to recycle what we have. But that replica will be built there, and a history center will be located there. And then in the center of the city, there will be a hub, if you will, a starting place, with these 3 spokes going out to the sides. And that hub will consist of something to do with the city, maybe the Oak Ridge Room from the library, and the American Museum of Science and Energy. Now, if that passes this next year, during this year, that means that the Park Service will then start a management study, which will take probably a couple of years. So we're looking 3 to 4 years down the road before you'll see the reality of a park, but I feel confident that that's going to happen. We've got strong support from Senator Alexander and from others that are supportive of it. Thank you for asking that. Any other final questions before I finish up? I hate to take these things back with me. So if you were too embarrassed to raise your hand and you want to sneak up here and get you one, it's okay with me. I'll leave them here and you can take them away. Thank you all so much for listening to me talk.